network.
You can't have any business
Since
that
I moved
violates
here,
federal, state, or
I've just been a
local laws.
volunteer.
So,
And the library
you know,
called and said, would you please serve on our board? And I
neighborhoods
said,
don't know
you
what to
betcha.
do nowadays because they want all these guys
And I'm a
having
really library
plants in their
person.
basement,
And do they
doing all
meet
kinds
up
of things, so
near
we
you
help
at
them get
Union?
organized.
Well, it's over all 14 facilities. The
I know,
library.
but do you
So-
meet at the,
We meet on
There's a lot of older
we go to
neighborhoods that
different-
used to
we
have
go to all-
organizations
Yeah, we try to,
that
often
were
we go to the
responsible for
different
taking care of the
libraries. And I
streets
advocate
that
for the
the city
library and I
doesn't
make
own,
speeches and
know,
I
and
visit
there's
college
all kinds of things
campuses
to run
and
into where
do that thing.
you help the
what did
neighborhoods get
there was
organized,
something,
deal with the state and the city or agencies, and code enforcement.
Call to order, please. Unless I'm miscounting, we do have a quorum. So we'll get the regular meeting for the Community Advisory Committee underway. I know we'll have a few folks coming in. Start off with introductions, and we'll just go around the table. I'm Jim Moore, at-large and chair of the committee.
I'm Jessica McMullen, your Policy and Communications Manager here at PPACG.
Sharon Brown, State Doc.
Hal Moffett, representing El Paso County.
Patty Acola, Colorado Springs.
Kim Muchler, citizen at large.
Roy Rosenthal. I'm just sitting in today, but starting next month, presumably I'll be the Manitou Springs representative.
And we welcome you. We welcome you.
Thank you.
And Tim O'Donnell from Kono.
And
Julie Ott, League of Women Voters.
And for our newcomers, the microphones in front of you are tied together, but they do have to broadcast and they have to be on. So if the little blue light is not lit,
It's lit.
you push the clear or the gray button, and that should make it work.
Kevin Walker, citizen at large.
Thank you, sir. And in our audience right now, Mark Andrew from CDOT and Ken Prather, and we hear from him shortly. And usually we have some of the staff across the back, but we don't today because we have a very abbreviated schedule. Okay, actually, Bethany Schomer is back there in the back, and as we mentioned earlier, I do want to thank the newer members of the committee for arriving early and for the orientation time that we had. I hope you found it as productive as we wanted it to be. And we have one more member who's wandering in right now. We've just gone around the table.
I'm Tom Fifley with the City of Colorado Springs, and I work with as the director of the El Paso County Retirement System here in town.
Thank you. Consent agenda, we have our consent items, the agenda, the minutes, and the board report. And I would simply spotlight to the members of the committee that in the board report, the board of directors on targets for the long-range transportation plan accepted our recommendation that the targets, except for infill, be approved, and they are still working on what the guidance is going to be, which I think spotlights the good thinking that you all went through last month when I was absent. So I appreciate what that work reflects. Okay, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move.
Second? It's been moved and seconded. Any comments? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Any public comments? Hearing none. Action items. Ken, you're up.
Good afternoon. I'm Ken Prather, Acting Transportation Director here at PPACG. I'll take just a couple minutes to explain the process that we're asking you to participate in this afternoon, which is an amendment to our long-range plan. And then Mark Andrew will take a few minutes to actually talk about the project itself that is being amended into the plan. We have a 20-year long-range transportation plan called the Regional Transportation Plan. We have to create a new one every 4 years, and right now we're about 2 years into our current plan. The plan is fiscally constrained, meaning that the projects that are in it also have money identified for them. CDOT wishes to add a project to the plan, and they are proposing to bring money to the table with that project from a variety of sources. So we can add the project to the plan, add revenue to the plan, and it'll still be fiscally constrained. Our normal process is to take it through our transportation and community advisory committees and to the board for final approval. It's coming to you first this time because the Transportation Advisory Committee meeting was canceled, so a special meeting has been scheduled for Friday morning at 9 o'clock. So they will act on it then. Normally we can report to you how the Transportation Committee has acted on these items. But based on comments that I've heard in discussions about I-25 and the gap, I think it's fully expected that the Transportation Advisory Committee is going to recommend approval of this, and seeing as how it's the board's number one priority for the region, I think this action certainly fits in with their priority. So if there's no questions about the process and what's being asked today, then I'll turn the time over to Mark to describe the project.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Ken. I wanted to say thanks to PPACG and their staff for helping get this application in for infra and all the documents that we received. I think it's going to really help the application process, and then it is a team effort between the communities, and I've seen not just El Paso County, but Douglas County working with CDOT. And the city of Colorado Springs, making it a number one priority, and I think we've heard that call. And so this is good news. Essentially, what we're looking at is putting in an application for an infra grant on November 2nd, which will include $250 million of Senate Bill 267 funds. In addition to that, we're going to go after $75 million of infra federal grant. And then we're looking for up to $25 million in local contributions between El Paso County and Douglas County. And I'd heard Jennifer had actually told me that Douglas County commissioners had approved $10 million for the project. So there is some additional money from Douglas County. Our consultant is preparing the application with CDOT, and it will actually come from El Paso County and possibly jointly between El Paso County and Douglas County. I don't know if Jennifer has any update on that, but the point being, I think we get stand a better chance if it does come from those counties rather than from CDOT. So the total project we're looking at is $350 million, and that will include at least a 6-lane project, 6-lane widening. Possibly, we're looking at, and we'll talk about this in the public meeting, maybe providing an additional 16-foot shoulder, which will allow for, this is in addition to the 3 lanes. So this will be more of a breakdown area or a future expansion possibility that we may look at for additional capacity. So we may end up, hopefully, with the funding, providing an 8-lane typical section through there. So that's still to be determined, but that's what we're discussing right now. Come to the public meetings that we've got planned, and we'll talk about that in more detail. But so I think we have a good chance of getting that $75 million with infra grant. I think we meet a lot of the criteria for safety. Leveraging skin in the game is a big part of it. Knowing that local contribution is a big part of that. Project readiness. We've actually bumped up the schedule to get the project shovel ready by a year from now, essentially November 2018. So that's almost 6 months sooner than we were contemplating. And essentially what we've done is we've taken the PEL study, which goes from Monument up to 470, and what the team's decided to do is finish that study or slow it down, but accelerate the environmental assessment and project design from Castle Rock to Monument. So we think that it's better that we focus on that portion first and get that environmental document done for project readiness and then finish the PEL later. I think there's some merit to finishing that planning environmental linkage document to go to 470 because there'll be other projects that may come out of that in the future, but again, we're just focusing on the gap right now. So again, this measure will amend the long-range plan. DRCOG is also amending their long-range plan to include the project. So, and this has to be done as part of the application process for infra. So, any questions?
Earl?
On the extra 2 lanes, does that include bridges, just to be confirmed, or is it just extra?
It does include bridges. However, like the county line bridge, we're looking at whether we need to widen that. If we don't have to widen it, likely it will not. But that doesn't mean that we don't need to address some of the asset management needs to address, the girders up there are looking pretty bad. We address some of that with the project. But as far as widening, we'll only widen bridges that we need to widen or replace what we need to replace.
For the initial project?
For the initial project, right.
When you say
Second
county
thing
line
is-
bridge, I'm trying to envision there's an overpass at our
The
county.
overpass, that's the bridge he's talking about.
There's an interchange up at county line.
We'd have to do, if you're talking about widening I-25, you wouldn't need to widen the bridge.
I think it
Or
may
you
be
have to
wide
widen
enough. It may be wide enough
Okay.
to accommodate our typical
Oh,
section
okay,
through there.
Okay. Sorry, I was thinking about the surface of the bridge.
Well, same. The only other thing is for those that are new, DRCOG, it took me a long time to understand that we weren't talking about a person.
Yeah.
We're actually talking about a governmental agency.
Denver
quasi,
region.
Denver region.
Denver
And it's
region.
abbreviated DRCOG.
Yeah.
4 million persons.
Isn't a person.
Kevin, and then
My question is reasonable expectation the proper language for us to say that we're still fiscally constrained, because we use it a lot in this little document?
Yeah, federal requirement, federal language is reasonably anticipated,
Okay.
so that is what is appropriate. And I have double-checked with FHWA, Federal Highways Administration, the fact that we have had, well, Senate Bill 267 has been approved. That was the bill that was just passed back in April. The 2 ballot issues, the Tabor refund and the PPRTA, we've got a history of PPRTA projects and approvals here. Tabor refunds have been approved here. So from the FHWA's perspective, it's reasonable to assume that these would be approved on November 7th, because all of this is happening before the ballot issues have been approved, before the grant request. But the language in the letter here has all of the key attributes that the infra grant requires. It's focused on high leveraging of local dollars. There's 78 to 79% local dollars on this for a $75 million grant. It's a regional, national, significant freight corridor, economic vitality. There's safety problems with it. It is the perfect candidate for the infra grant program. Doesn't guarantee we're going to get it, but it's reasonable to assume we do. If it doesn't come through, then in a few months, we'll be coming back to you to amend the plan again to either add another $75 million in from somewhere else that we didn't get from the infra grant, or we have to take the project out of the plan.
Patty?
It sounds like we're going to get a new highway, but it's not going to be until 2040.
No. This is a long-range plan that goes out to 2040. It forecasts out to 2040.
When do you think I'm going to get a new highway?
If we get the funding, they
Yes.
will start construction in end of 2018,
2 years out.
That
two
sounds
years
better.
after that.
Thank you.
Good clarification.
Yes, ma'am.
Jennifer Irvin, and I'm your former TAC chair, but also a TAC member, and I'm also the El Paso County engineer. I just wanted to also thank staff for getting this on the agenda, but also thank CDOT. I just want to urge your support of this measure. We have been working very hard on the I-25 PEL, but also we, El Paso County, are also part of the GAP Coalition with Douglas County. Economic Development Chamber is part of that coalition, and we have a lot of stakeholders here that are pushing this forward in a positive measure. This is a critical safety issue for our region. As you know, we had 2 state troopers who have been killed on this stretch of highway. It is critical to also our economic vitality here in the region. We have a lot of freight come through there, but probably most importantly is that this is a strategic defense highway, and supports our second largest employer here in Colorado. So it really does help all of our military installations, not only logistically, but also to bring those people here and to be able to support our military installations. And finally, I just want to say, I think from a regional perspective, I got a phone call last night at 7 o'clock from the Douglas County engineering staff saying, hey, you know what, we're putting skin in the game too. We got $10 million from our fund, and there's probably other local entities who are going to be putting money in as well. So I think we have a great regional coalition and a strong support from not only our local commissioners, city council people, and elected officials, but also from our state and also from our federal. We've had federal delegation members be coming to our I-25 coalition events, and I think that that's part of the importance of, shows the importance of this corridor. So I just urge your support of this, and usually I don't come to these meetings, but this is a really important project for El Paso County, and I know that our commissioners are supporting this fully, and we look forward to hopefully being successful on this grant.
Any questions for Jennifer? Rachel?
I didn't have a question. That's very eloquent. Can I move approval at this point?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any other comments or questions on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Let it be noted it was unanimous.
Thank you. Louder than usual.
And louder than usual. Thank you all very much for your presentations on that. The one comment that I would share with you is in the early 70s, I was in graduate school at the University of Denver, and my wife had a friend down here, and we drove that highway, and it's the same highway that it was then.
It is.
So,
Absolutely right.
there's been a lot more growth out there. So.
Yes.
All right. Brian Potts. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you. Good to see everyone. It's been a little while since I was here for an update, so I wanted to give you, now that we're really getting further along and getting close to a pretty momentous part of this study process. I also know that this is a time where we have a few new CAC members on now that weren't here the last time I came to talk to you guys. So to give you a brief orientation on what this project is, the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments has had at least a 10-year history in being involved in certain types of land use planning related to military installations in our area. Obviously, we have 5 military installations, and they are a key and large component of this region, both from an economic and a community perspective. And with that, back in 2015, Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments was awarded a grant to look at the intersection between community and military uses, primarily having to do with development and land use. So with that, you have an operational footprint that occurs with all these installations, and I think it's well recognized that it isn't just restricted to this region. In many cases, these military operations can go to other parts of the state, other states. We have other military installations such as Buckley and some other facilities in other states that actually come out and train in our area. So in order to kind of restrict the scope, because you could see scope creep could go pretty far out, it was determined through coordination with PPACG and the Office of Economic Adjustment which is an office within the Department of Defense that handles these types of studies, that we would do a 4-county area of Pueblo County, El Paso, Teller, and Fremont, since that seemed to be sort of a fairly definable boundary as to the majority of military activity that originates from the installations in our area. With that, we were awarded a grant of $1.3 million, which PPACG is the administrator of this. Obviously, having counties and representatives that go beyond the typical PPACG boundaries, this meant we worked with PACG, Pueblo Area COG, Upper Arkansas, a variety of different agencies to try and find representation that went across this 4-county region in order to make sure we're getting both elected officials and planning officials and transportation officials involved in the process. The idea is that by communicating with all these different stakeholders and working with the military and bringing the military representatives and community representatives, elected officials, professionals to the table on certain types of issues, there's a chance to find common ground around land use and development such as stormwater or transportation issues, and try to identify what are some recommended strategies on how community stakeholders, the political aspect, professionals, and the military can work together on some of these where there's a shared interest. And so with that, this study is entirely recommendational. It's not regulatory. It's simply trying to look at, we looked at 26 different issues to start off with through various interviews, public surveys, communication with community stakeholders, and trying to figure out what are the most relevant issues where there is that intersection between the military and the community, and then delving in deeper and researching those issues, seeing what plans were out there, seeing what regulations were out there pertaining to these. And then through that process of study, that's, of course, that part of the research and trying to compile and then meet and rehash these things, and then establishing working groups, which frequently have involved members of the CAC. For example, the new Santa Fe Trail, I mentioned in some of the working groups that did involve CAC participation. The new Santa Fe Trail working group was one that that working group was incredibly successful in the eyes of those who participated, that very rapidly we came to some ideas on how the Air Force Academy and various community partners can work together on both keeping that trail open and also looking at room for improvement. That's the other thing we're looking for, is with communication to the public about trail issues in that instance, trying to figure out, there are other trail needs in the area that the Air Force may need to work with, looking at the intersection between trail use and stormwater issues, since many of these trails go through the same corridors. So within this update that I provided, I tried, and so I'm not going to go through each, I figured you guys can read this, I'm not going to repeat it, but the Santa Fe Trail Working Group, the strategies that were developed are in here. We're at a point in this process. Our grant funding, as I mentioned, started in September of 2015. I am not the original project manager. That was Angela Essing. After about a year, she had taken off, and then I took over a little over a year ago. And now we're starting to get to a point where we're drafting parts of the study in preparation to engage the public with a full set of information, strategies that are recommended strategies, background information on why these seem like they'll work. And then we're going to get these draft chapters online and hold a couple of public meetings in a couple of geographic areas to try and engage the public on getting comments on that draft and seeing, are we on, how are we doing? Are we on the right track with this? Is there anything we need to tweak before we finalize the study? We have about 6 months left in this grant. We're also going to be looking at pursuing what is called funding for Phase 2 through the Office of Economic Adjustment, Department of Defense, for implementation. This would be technical assistance to both the community and military installations with trying to do implementation on some of these strategies. Some of these include potentially, there's a mapping. We're working on getting an online map with a bunch of data sets online that would be a community tool, for example, with trails. We hope to work with some of the local open space and trails professionals to try and get some regional mapping online. So maybe it could help out with identifying, for example, if there's a trail area that might need some maintenance, there would be a way to figure out, okay, who do I need to contact based upon this map? Because someone drives, rides on the trail or walks a trail, and they don't know necessarily where a jurisdictional boundary changes there. Therefore, they may not know who to call. And this might be a tool for that. So these are some of the options we're proposing to see if we can get funding for this. There's other ideas that will be coming up later in the series of meetings we're going to be having. We're about to move into setting up the last few working groups, which, as I mentioned in here, we're going to need a couple of CAC representatives. I know that there had been a member of the CAC that expressed interest in the past on joining in on the public communication working group, and so I come back again because I wasn't sure if that person was still available or if someone else was interested, but I was trying to dig through my records and I couldn't.
We'll talk about it.
We'll talk about it, absolutely. So the idea with those two groups is that the public communication group, which is, we're doing this at the end of the study because that way we can potentially touch on a lot of the other topics that came before. That working group would include public information officers from the installation, people that are engaged in getting information out to the public within the local jurisdictions, and other interested parties along those lines that would be relative to having a discussion as to military, what kind of information would be helpful for us to get out to the public, and then vice versa. As a community, what kind of information would be helpful for us to get to you guys about what is going on within the public realm. And so looking at that exchange of information and how to improve those ties. And that's the idea behind that working group. And coming up with some recommended strategies on how to potentially to accomplish that. The second group that we're looking for participation in is what's called the Agriculture Conservation Working Group. This is going to be focused on kind of the intersection between military operations, habitat preservation, open space, stormwater. A lot of these things come into play with natural lands or agricultural lands, and therefore we're trying to get some people together on a working group to talk about how the military and community can work on preserving certain areas that may be mutually beneficial to both the community and military to preserve for agricultural reasons or stormwater or what have you. So those are the two items that I wanted to bring forth and give you kind of an orientation as to what we're working on at this point. Our goal with this study is that we'll have the all draft chapters at least a 75% completion by December of this year, and at that point they'd be online as we start to fill in some of the gaps and start to get public input on this so that we can finalize the draft by February. We're hoping that'll give a good 2 to 3 month window to get public comment and be able to update as we get a series of public comments where we have a sufficient material to do an update. And that way the public can see the document kind of evolving during that process. And hopefully we can get something that really is a useful tool for both the community and the military, which is the whole goal of this process. With that, I hope I didn't forget anything, but please, do you have any questions or any comments or?
Question?
Yep, I do.
Yes.
The Land Use and Development Working Group, it's been my experience that the other studies that are going along around the country, this is where the rubber sometimes doesn't meet the road quite so well. And so I'm wondering where you're going with that.
Yes.
Because when you start dealing with private property and
Yes.
all the other kinds of things, I wonder if there's any update on where that group is going.
Yes, that one has been obviously one of the pretty much the core focus, and has been a lot of different kinds of meetings. It hasn't been one meeting necessarily with the same folks at it all the time. It's more been a group of different meetings with different people. So, for example, we have had some meetings with the economic development professionals from the Chamber and the City of Colorado Springs. We still have to set up a meeting with El Paso County. We've had some meetings talking with developers. We've had some meetings talking with the various professionals that are involved in processing development review. And what seems to be coming out of this, as with many other issues, is it's just figuring out how to help people communicate better between. How are the information flows going between planners, developers, and the military when it comes to military issues? Now, obviously, there's a lot of other issues that then start to tailor in the relationships between citizens and the development process. And so that one is, obviously that tailors into that a little bit, but because this is a somewhat military and community relationship focused, we've been trying to stick to the relationships around there. Some of this may, though, be pertinent to a lot of different other stakeholders that may want to get more involved in the development process. So in some cases, we're trying to tailor these so that these recommendations could go for just about any kind of stakeholder that may want to get more involved in the development process, either with the military or, so the strategy development is still ongoing there.
So it's mostly focused on information as opposed to regulation?
Yes,
You're
at this
not
point.
thinking that this is going to develop regulation around land uses or zone changes or property land use changes?
Not necessarily. We're not looking for regulatory recommendations. At this point, we're really looking at, given the existing regulatory environment and sort of the process of development, we're looking within that context, because some of it is that it's not so much that the regulations need to change, it's just how are people expressing their interests when it comes to the military coming forward and saying, a development here may impact our operations, and we want to make you aware of that.
I can tell, I mean, I represent a lot of those people.
Yes.
And I know a lot of those people, and I know that they, if you're trying to propose some kind of regulation, they want to know.
Yes.
They'll be talking to you.
Exactly.
So I
Yeah,
wanted to give you sort of a heads up
Oh,
on
yeah.
that.
No, actually, I've been in touch with the HBA. In fact, the HBA Housing and Building Association and a couple of developers were on our working group for the flight training at the Air Force Academy. And so we've tried to engage them in places where there is a potential for there to be an impact directly on certain developers and development types. We're really trying to engage the stakeholders from a wide net as best as possible, so we're not missing anyone or leaving anyone in the lurch. There was, I believe, one of the recommendations that did come out of there was actually made to some extent by the developers and realtors about trying to get some additional disclosures in, or some additional means for informing residents as to flight activity overhead. So that was something that they actually proposed. And so in some cases, we're not necessarily looking for a regulatory change, but really trying to look at the exchange of information, because that seems to be the really, to be the core of where there is room for improvement with some of these issues. It's that everyone actually does share a lot of common interests. It's just that they may not have known it. And so there's connecting people is also part of this process. So.
Any other questions?
What's your timeline for the new working groups?
With these, we're trying to get these new working groups started with their first meeting in October. I'd say by mid-October, and carrying through into November. I anticipate with many of these, it should only be possibly 2 to 3 meetings. And so, in terms of an overall time commitment, obviously we're not looking for too much of one, but maybe could be 1 to 2 hours per meeting. And so that's what we're trying to accomplish with these. Obviously, if there's more things left unanswered and we need to carry it on, we will, as long as we can, while still getting the project done on time. But we're going to make sure we cover these issues adequately. So,
How would one of the members that's interested let their interest be known?
I'd say they should start by, if possible, going through you. So that, because if there's a few different people that contact me, obviously people can contact me if they have questions, but I just want to make sure that in terms of if there's any kind of, if we get half a dozen, I think it might be wise to have it go through you if that's
Watch
amenable.
me pass the buck now.
You can always pass it back and say
I'm
you'd
not
not like to.
I'm not going to pass it to you.
Okay.
Bethany, is she still there or she left?
She just walked down.
Oh, she just left.
Okay.
Okay.
We have Jessica.
I think that's the smartest way to do it. And then if we do have more than 1 or 2, then I'll sort that out.
Okay, and I'm open to having 2 members of the CAB.
Okay.
I just think anything beyond that might get a little unwieldy. Or if there want to be alternates, that's another option.
Okay.
So.
All right. So either if you want to let me know today, or Jessica, or Bethany, but we'll collect those names. Hi, Bethany, I volunteered you for something. Jessica will update you.
See what happens when you step out?
Yeah. You're now the chair of the committee.
Well, Jim, just as a point of clarification, I did start as our kind of representative on this, but then had to step back for health issues.
Right.
And Vince took over.
Right.
And so I'd like to give a shout out to Vince. He's not here.
Yeah, he had a lot of great input during that process. And early on when you were there, I appreciated your input as well. So I want to thank you for that. So.
Oh, yeah, it is. It is. It's the same fence.
And that one went for a full year. That one did. So you don't have to worry about that with these, so.
No.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Brian.
Thank you. We'll
Appreciate
see you
it.
again within a few months.
Important work, and it is important for us to be aware that, as Jessica briefed the new members, and we need to be reminded from time to time, we are meant to be sort of a two-way communication vehicle, not only bringing forward our ideas here in this forum, but taking ideas that need more public involvement and passing that information out to our respective constituencies, or if you're an at-large person like me, stand on the street corner and ask everybody that walks by. We try to do what we can.
And if I may, one point to add exactly to that is that we are certainly relying upon people like you and your associates that have a community interest, that when this draft document does get out and we're looking for public comment, we really mean it. We want the word to get out. We want people to read through this, and so we get as much public comment as possible, so it reflects the interests of this community.
Brian, I'm again, sorry, can you give us the date that you think the 75% draft will be available?
We believe that'll be available by mid-December. So, the first 3 chapters, actually, though, should be posted sometime next month. The exact date depends on what our technical committee decides on October 5th. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think Rick's decided he doesn't want to talk to us.
It's like
No,
you're running around.
he's
You're
getting-
ready to.
Yeah, we're way ahead of schedule. Mr. Sonnenberg,
Sir, Jim?
you're up to bat, sir.
How about Mark Andrew? He's more important than me.
He has already weighed in and
Oh,
explained. He got what he wanted out of us, a pound of flesh or something like that. So.
Bethany, I brought some annual reports. Did you already have a set? Okay.
There will be extras.
Did I get a copy of this? I think I have this at home, and I'm not sure why.
Did you already have his Okay.
Yeah, because I remember this part. I didn't understand it, but I remember it.
Okay, my name is Rick Sonnenberg, and in addition to my temporary job as the acting executive director of PPACG, my main job the last 12 and a half years has been the program and contracts manager for the Pikes Peak RTA since I joined the Pikes Peak RTA in May of 2005. PPRTA started in January 1st of 2005. So, Chairman Jim, I think shall I cover a little bit of the origin and the reason for the PPRTA?
We got this.
Okay, yes.
Probably a good outline.
I'll just zip through faster. That I assume you've seen the PowerPoint, or you have the PowerPoint, so you've seen it. So I'll probably zip through orally faster than I could scroll through the slides, but I'll cover a lot of the same stuff. In 1997, the state legislature approved a new state law allowing RTAs, Rural Transportation Authorities. Oh, by the way, Chairman Jim, how long do I have?
Well, according to Susan, you have until 4:20.
Oh, no.
Ooh, okay, that's a lot different.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Michelle.
So the legislature passed a state law that allowed RTAs to be formed if the RTAs went to the voters to be approved and have a funding source. So the funding sources that were put into the state law by the legislature were a sales tax not to exceed 1 cent, a visitor benefit tax, also known as hotel motel tax, Let's see, what was the third one? Is a vehicle registration fee of up to $10 per vehicle per year. And later, the legislature added up to 5 mills of property tax. All of these funding sources would have to go to the voters to be approved. So in 2002, city and county leaders started talking up the concept, and through 2002, 2003, and the Board of County Commissioners liked the idea of setting up an RTA. Also in the state law, it required that RTAs include 2 or more governments, so 2 cities, 2 counties, or 1 county, 1 city, etc. So the idea was discussed with the Board of County Commissioners, Colorado Springs City Council. They both bought in, and then they authorized the then county engineer to make the rounds to the 7 suburbs in the county to see how many wanted to go on a ballot to the voters to set up, an RTA with 2 or more governmental entities. John McCarty, then county engineer, made the rounds to the 7. 2 decided to join the City of Colorado Springs and El Paso County to go on the ballot to ask the voters to set up an RTA. And the one revenue source that they everybody agreed to ask the voters for was a 1-cent sales tax. And this is for transportation improvements. It's a very broad category in that RTA state law, that very broad and liberal definitions of what transportation improvements can be. So the 2 suburbs that bought in to join the city and county, go to the voters, were City Manitou Springs and Green Mountain Falls. Palmer Lake, Monument, the ones that didn't originally were Palmer Lake, Monument, Calhan, Rama, and Fountain. Later, Rama changed their mind in the November 2008 and came in Johnny come lately. They came in later, starting January 1st, 2009. So it did go to the voters with the 4 original member governments in November of 2004. It did pass by rounding off to the nearest percentage points, 55-45. It passed. The setup that was in the ballot measure for the citizens to vote on would be 55% of the money would go to a specific list of capital projects that would be listed on the ballot. So those would be the only capital projects that could be done, would be those specific list of capital projects for 55% of the money. 35% of the money would be for maintenance, with no specific definition in the ballot, and 10% would go to Mountain Metro to enhance their bus system, add routes, add evenings, add weekends, etc. So that passed in November 2004, so it started in 2005, January 1st, and the Department of Revenue started collecting the tax and submitting it to the PPRTA. It was 60-something million in early years. It went up to 70-something million until the economic downturn. Then it dropped back down into the 60s. But since coming out of the dip in the economic downturn, the revenues climbed quite steadily. And in this budget year, we just tipped the $100 million per year mark. And we are, since board members have asked in recent years when we are going to get cumulatively to $1 billion, our Beverly and my estimate is sometime in February or March of 2018 we will have collected a sum total of $1 billion. Now this goes to the member governments by population. and the city of Colorado Springs is just under 71%. El Paso County is around 28%. So that's 99. So the other 1% goes to the smaller entities. So they get their capital allocation, they get their maintenance allocation in each annual budget cycle. We decide on a revenue estimate. The board decides in September, and then Beverly, our finance director, sends out to the 5-member governments, here's your share of our estimate for the upcoming budget year. So how do you want to spend it on your capital list? How do you want to spend it on maintenance? And of course, 10% off the top goes to transit. So they submit their budgets, and so it's a 3 FTE staff here at PPACG that was selected to administer this program at the 30,000 foot level. There's myself, there's Beverly, the finance manager, and then there's portions of other support folks in the building, some of Jessica's time, Dreama that puts together the agenda packets, Jenny who does the annual reports and monitors and improves and updates our website. So that there's 6 or 7 folks that charge little bits of time, so it's a total of 3 FTEs. It's an administrative contract between the PPRTA Board of Directors and the PPACG Board of Directors, some of whom are the same people. Our 30,000 foot level control starts with budgets, then contracts. Any contract or expenditure of $25,000 or more has to come through the PPRTA CAC and board. There's a separate CAC for the PPRTA. So budget, then contracts, invoices. We write the invoices to the vendors in probably 95% of the cases. A few of the cases we're reimbursing the member government, but they have to show the same level of detail of their valid expense as we would if we were getting it from the vendor. Now the vendor invoices have to go through the member government who has to sign off, so it comes over to us with approval from member governments before we pay the vendor direct. So twice a month we are writing $5 or $6 or $7 million worth of checks that go out in the mail. Some the vendors like to pick them up, especially the ones that are over $1 million for a check. They'd like to not wait for a day or two for the mail. They'd like to have that check right away. The PPRTA Board of Directors has 3 City of Colorado Springs members, 3 El Paso County members, and 1 each from the smaller entities, Manitou, Green Mountain Falls, and Rama, for a total of 9. I was not involved in that design of that mix because that was before my time, but my guess is that the 33111 was purposeful so that no one entity had a automatic guaranteed majority for any votes. A current event is that the PPRTA CAC and PPRTA board have heard presentations from CDOT and others that where very large CDOT projects, in order to help them along and get them moving, CDOT projects elsewhere in the state have received local assistance. So that was a compelling argument that moved our CAC and board to put on the ballot for this coming November, a ballot issue to ask the voters, because if we're amending the ballot, we have to go back to the voters, to ask the voters for up to $10 million over a 2-year period for calendars 2018, 2019 of revenue in excess of the budget times the .55 for the capital piece to be dedicated to the 2.5 mile section of the I-25 Gap project that you probably have all heard about in the news. So the way that would work is if our 2018 budget is $100 million, the board has set that. So if we collect, say, 110 at the end of 2018, we get 10 million over, then we'd have, then the .55 for the capital piece would be applied to the 10, so that would be a little over 5. So that would be set aside and reserved to help CDOT with the 2.5 mile section of the 18 mile section of the I-25 Gap project that goes from the Monument 105 overpass up to the south end of Castle Rock. Same thing would happen in 2019. Now that's the good, the positive side of the coin. Negative side is if we have a $100 million budget and we only collect 102, then the $2 million gets applied times the .55, and then there was only a little over $1 million to set aside to help CDOT for that year. So it's not a $10 million guarantee, Mark. It's whatever. You take the gross revenue in excess of the budget times .55, and that would go to help CDOT each year for 2018, 2019, up to a maximum of $10 million to help CDOT. Wow. Questions? I finished a lot faster than I thought.
Questions, everybody?
The PPRTA 1 projects.
Yes?
Are they, I know they're not all completed.
Correct.
In 2014, that money was set aside for completion of those projects?
Yes.
And then you started with a new kind of slate with a new set of projects?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
When do you think all that money, all the first 10-year money will be spent?
Another 2 years. It's been about $5 million that's been set aside since January 1st of 2015. That was the PPRTA 1 money has been set aside. To see if that was needed for Mark Sheffield South. Finishing Mark Sheffield South was the priority. So the 4.8 was being held to see if there are any change orders or other needs. That is now finished, and so there are no needs for Mark Sheffield South to tap into that 4.8. So just this last month, the PPRTA CAG board decided on the pieces of Mark Sheffield North to get that 4.8 million, one of which is the section from where it ends at the north end of the construction is at North Carefree. So a piece of the 4.8 is going to take it one more traffic signal, one more big intersection to Barnes. Yeah. And then another piece is to do a bridge, because the Mark Sheffield project on the north end, per the ballot, is not only up to Woodman, but also to make the 90-degree turn to Black Forest. So another piece of the 4.8 is to do a bridge in that 90-degree turn, because some developers have assured the city that they will build part of that road if the PPRTA will put in the bridge. So that was the request of city staff. The CAG and the board bought into that very valid argument to, if you put in a bridge, you can leverage private money to build a piece of the road.
Rick, where can we go, where could I go to find the ballot language and everything for is that going to be on the November ballot?
The new one? Yeah, I can run upstairs and bring you down 15 copies before you're done today. Or I can email it.
How fast you can move.
Yeah, I'm moving pretty fast today.
Any other questions for Rick?
Yeah.
One thing I noticed on the map for capital projects 15 to 24 that is not there is the extension of Powers to I-25. Is that inside of PPRTA? Is it?
May I borrow one copy and see that there's an error?
I may be wrong. It's certainly more than likely, but.
Thank you, Mark.
It's on the B list, 31 million.
It's on the B list of PPRTA 2. That's why it's not on the map. That map is only the A list. Thank you, Mark.
What does that mean?
Okay.
Sorry.
That allows me to use up 4 more minutes of my time. There's, the original PPRTA 1 had an A list, B list, and a C list, and we didn't get to the B or the C in PPRTA 1, and we're not going to finish Mark Shuffle North with that 4.8 million, so we will not quite finish the A list of PPRTA 1. It was designed in 3 pieces in PPRTA 1, and then in 2, an A and a B list for PPRTA 2, with setting priorities. The A list is higher priority than the B list, and it was designed if revenues and expenses occurred as it was designed back when city and county staff were working on a PPRTA 2 capital list. Optimally, we could get to the B list at year 7.5 of PPRTA 2, which started January 1st of 2015. Bev and I have not projected how well we're doing against that original model, but it was forced into putting more money against the A list to try to be sure to get to the B list this time in PPRTA 2 instead of how we did not get to the B list in PPRTA 1. So anyway, did I answer your question?
Kind of. Timing-wise, as far as that project ever being on the A list, is that after 24? Is that kind of a natural assumption?
Since Bev and I have not projected timing, don't hold me to this number, but I'd say in the probably in 2021 or 2022, we might get to the B list, and then it would be up to the member governments to
prioritize that list.
To propose, which is what they do every year. They out of their A list, they propose what they want to get funded out of their capital allocation for that budget year. So it'd be up to the city to propose that. There was one instance out of PPRTA 1 when the board put its thumb on the scale and told a member government to change their timing of a capital project, but 99 out of 100, it's the board goes along with what the member government is proposing with their capital allocation for that particular year.
And Hal, you're talking about that section between, what is it, 83 and
that
Voyager?
goes through Flying Horse or whatever it is that's out there.
Yeah, that's that.
And if you look at the map, there's a lot of great things, and then there's a bit of a gap in that kind of mid-north area. Monument and Woodmore have a lot of activity because they need it. But that gap, that connector, it's a need. Everybody realizes that it's getting it up the west.
Yes.
Because it's expensive.
Portion of that we had a few months ago from the interstate to Voyager.
Developer funded. Mark can talk to that.
Right. Okay, thank you. No, that helps.
Other questions, comments? Rick, thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome.
I think I'm among those who's been extremely impressed with the RTA, both promises made and results, and then seeing the PPRTA signs around
Good.
all of the specific cone zones that we get to
Yes.
navigate through.
So just to be clear on my side, you want to see the half-page ballot measure language that's coming November.
I'm just thinking, if some of us want to start communicating to folks our support,
Sure.
we probably need to have some idea of what we're supporting. I mean, I think it's-
I'll be back down in 7 or 8 minutes if you're still here.
Okay, well, we're going to try to be, we will talk slowly. Okay. Any announcements from around the table of events or things coming up or anything that you're seeing that you think we ought to be taking a look at as part of our agenda? Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I was going to, the next thing you were going to hear was, Jessica, do you have anything you'd like to raise?
I do. We've got our joint board and CAC meeting next Thursday on the 5th at 2 p.m. right here in this conference room. Hopefully you all have that on your calendar. If you don't, I'll resend it. Some of you as new members may not have it. The goal of this is just kind of for the CAC and the board to have a chance to talk about their roles, talk about their goals, and then get to know each other.
It's next Thursday?
Next Thursday,
the 5th at 2 p.m.
2 to 4 p.m. here. And just a reminder on your calendars, the board meeting is every second Wednesday of the month from 9, it broadcast from 9 until noon. Usually doesn't run quite that long, but that's always an open meeting. Any of the meetings here are open meetings, just like ours. And the TAC meeting will be on the 19th. I try to attend that. So, any other questions, comments for the good of the cause?
I'd just like to say whoever's idea it was to put this on a calendar form instead of that long sheet of paper, thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Yeah, this
Much
is,
better format.
this is Outlook, isn't it? Yeah, I thought, it looks very familiar.
Jim, is it good form to talk about a fundraiser? At this
Sure,
point?
I think you talked about fundraisers
I
the last
talk
time.
about fundraisers all the time. There is a sheet at the entrance table. 13th of October, you have the opportunity to send a dozen roses in their own individual box, hand-delivered to the address of your choice in El Paso County for $25 to say thank you, or to say I appreciate you, or maybe I love you to someone that counts. It's $25. It's done through one of the local Sartoma clubs. We make about $10 per dozen, and we give that back to the community for speech and hearing activities. So there's nothing special about the date. That's kind of what makes it cool. It's a statement of appreciation or other. We've got some businesses that give it to all employees, and then they can either accept it personally or repurpose it when you take it home. So anyway, there are some sheets back there. If you're interested, give me a call. Again, free delivery on the 13th of October, which is a Friday, to the location and person of your choice.
Friday the 13th?
Friday the 13th.
Sometimes that's the way it works out. Anyway, that is a fundraiser for one of the local Sartoma clubs. We give back multiple $100,000 per year to the community. Every little bit helps.
Okay. All right. If there's nothing further, invite you to hold. Here he comes.
Yeah, I spoke softly.
There he is.
Faster than you said?
I told you, we talked slow.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Well, one of the things that occurred to me too is, as you're aware, we've gone through a couple of cycles now where the RTA ballot issue model has been repeated, and we got another one coming our way, which is going to be 2A for a stormwater fee, and I think if we stay that way, we're okay. I think we'll see how that all works out. All right, if there's nothing further, Rick, thank you very much. I don't even ask for a motion. We are adjourned.
I like that.
Everybody who knows they've never this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all good news.
Yes, sir.
When that